Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to our weekly Learn in Your Lunchtime webinar. And yes, as you can see on the screen, we have Tracey Ashington back in studio to tell us all how to get a job, which I think is absolutely such a massively important thing at the moment. But as always, we go live most weeks on a Friday at 12 o'clock, and we bring you lots of guests and topics to help you be a successful student, get ready for the workplace, and then be successful on into the workplace. So we have a range of resources. Many of them are free. Many of you have taken advantage of them and gone on to be extremely successful. Tracey, in her own right, has a career coaching business, and I'll share the details of that with you so you can get in touch with her. But as we do with many of our guests, Tracey's also going to share a lot of her own insights. She's very experienced in the world of graduate recruitment and career coaching. And today is really going to focus on that pivotal moment of getting a job through the interaction with the employer. And often that's going to revolve around an interview, but there's many aspects around that that you guys can ask some questions on and that we'll dive into. And we've all got different backgrounds and different experience that we can contribute to and help each other with. And if you've ever attended any of our webinars previously, you'll know that these are absolutely jam-packed with links and free resources and discussions. And I think many light bulb moments for people that go on and inspiration that they get that can often just, alter the course of their lives potentially, if not just help them, get through next week or make better plans for tomorrow. However we can help you, we want you to be successful. So Tracey, let's give you a chance to introduce yourself and talk about the topic for today.
Hi, everyone. As Peter said, I have been working with people. I mean, we all work with people, right? But I've been working with people in the sense of human resources and recruitment for many, many years, and always drawn back to student and graduate recruitment. So it's something that I just can't help myself. I love being out on campus. I love giving advice. I love helping people to get jobs. And so that's why I'm really enjoying the work that I'm doing now with the Student Success Coach. It's not like I'm a recruiter going onto campus saying, come work for us, come work for us. And now I can actually be objective and say, I think this is right for you. And I think that's, maybe is going to be something that, I don't know, drains you versus something that excites you, etc. So going on to what we're going to talk about today is interview skills. And as I said, when I talk about CVs, the same goes for interview skills. You could speak to a lot of different people and they will all say, this is what a perfect CV is, or you should do this in an interview, or definitely don't do that. And then you go to somebody else and they may tell you something different. And it's really confusing because do I greet them with a handshake? But so-and-so said, no, I shouldn't. And then you left thinking what is right and what is wrong. So what I always advise is to hear all of this information and all this advice from the people who have it, who are giving it to you, and then you sift through it and you see what makes sense for you or what feels right for you, and you do that. Okay, so this is my perspective. Obviously, I think it works, but let's see if it works for you guys.
Tracey, I think that's so important. There are so many books and articles and courses and coaches out there. That the reason for that is that because there are so many different problems that need to be solved, different people in the universe, and we all have a different perspective on life, and there are so many different industries and workplaces. So as much as we can give you that information, one of the things that we always talk about is taking action. And Tracey, just to extend on what you were saying, I believe that action is the greatest teacher. But a coach like Tracey or a webinar like, the one you're attending now, just guides you about what that next action should be. And as you take that action, you learn something. You take another action, you learn some more. And you're making progress and you're learning then what does and doesn't work for you. So, Tracey and I often have some slightly different perspectives on some of these topics, and that's fantastic. And you must take from both of us and from anything we can offer you, whatever is going to work for you in your situation. So Papile, we've got a nice big group with us today. Papile, good afternoon to you. Himal, good afternoon to you as well. And, as we always say, ask specific questions, please, so that we can give specific answers. I'll also put Tracey's details in the chat so that you can get in touch to follow up and get some more help in addition to this webinar. So Tracey, let's start off with some audience questions. I think that's always the best way to get into it. So if you're listening on the podcast, let me just read it out, but it's up on the screen. Sthembile says, good afternoon, everyone. When applying for a job, are the employers maybe strict on academic results, or are they more strict on other skills? Tracey.
I think, and I'm speaking at a student and graduate level, as I often say, the marks hold a lot of importance only because there isn't a lot else to go on. You guys are young, you haven't had work experience, all you've got is a degree. So your marks and your transcripts and your academics are definitely one of the few things that a job, potential employer can look at. So yes, they are. It doesn't mean that they have to be extremely strong marks. I've been coaching a few students this last 2 weeks, and they are not necessarily, they're not necessarily upper 60s, 70s, 80s, but they are solid student, and into sort of second and final rounds with some of the top companies in the country. And I think that in looking at it, they do look at a whole package, but throughout the years when I've looked through and screened CVs, I do tend to look at, first of all, university degree, year of study. It depends on if it's an intern or a graduate application. And then I look straight at the transcripts, not just at the marks. Look at what the subjects are, look at what the trends are, whether it's, certain subjects you're stronger at, etc. Remember, there are always reasons for to justify bad marks. First year, it's a massive change. You could fall apart. You could be in a new town. You could be, there could be a reason why you're having to rely on public transport because, when you guys are graduates with nothing more than a study loan, times are tough. There could be personal problems. There could be an illness in the family. So people are always going to understand that. And you're not begging for sort of, for them to overlook your marks because you're trying to get an easy way out. By telling people, you're sharing your story. And especially if the marks then get better, you can turn it into a positive thing. You can say, that year was terrible, I dropped out, whatever, I spent some time at home, got myself back on my feet, and the following year, I passed everything. Never hesitate to tell people. You're not looking to be pitied, you're explaining that you're a human being, and that was your journey.
Yeah. So Tracey, just a bit of a follow-up question. I mean, how often is it that people will say you have to get a minimum of a certain percentage for a certain subject to get a job in this company? I mean, how common is that? I mean, are organizations that bind?
When I first joined Rand Merchant Bank, we were doing a very small graduate program, and I remember we were very strict on 70%. And looking back, I was really short-sighted because some of the top people we hired over the years who went on to do amazing things had 50s and 60s. So I think that it may depend on industry. It could be that for a particular job in a particular company, like for RMB, they really want someone quantitative, so they want somebody to pass their financial engineering with a particularly good mark. But it's not common. It's a group of factors. And if somebody has passed, something that I think over the years of experience on the different South African campuses, I've seen that certain universities mark differently to others. And then I know certain universities are notorious for, let's say, stellies for their engineers. It's a tough course. So graduate recruiters who've been around kind of know that whole scenario, and they bring that into it as well.
Great. Thanks, Tracey. And I mean, I think the important message there is there's always a human on the other side that you should always aim to get through to and have a discussion with and be proactive about finding who that person is and how you can get in touch with them. Even though that company has their processes and their thresholds and their requirements, etc. If you're passionate enough about getting a job, you'll find the human on the other side of the process and have that discussion to explain bad marks or context or a story, etc. That, hopefully someone like yourself, Tracey, who has that sort of pragmatic, type of view, will then sort of understand you and recognize your potential and help you get that job that you're looking for. Okay, so Tracey, going into another question, which I think sets us up perfectly for the sort of main thrust of the discussion this afternoon, is all about the interview. So and that's typically the first question. So, what we've got up on the screen there is a question. When the interviewer asks the question, tell me more about yourself. What is it expected for us as students to say? So, Tracey, I think that's also going to go on to another question, which I'll put up just now while you're answering that. What if they don't have any experience? So, how do they handle that first question as a student? And are they worried that the employer is looking for actual work experience? How do they handle that?
Okay, so I just wanted to go back to the previous question because I remembered something that I should have said. A lot of recruiters now are using online platforms to help with the volume of students applying. If the platform is set up so that you can't submit your application because maybe you have, obviously they've got to standardize these, so if it comes that you can't submit because there is a failure or something, it's perfectly acceptable that you reach out to the graduate recruiter in the company and just explain you haven't been able to go via the platform, or you're nervous about applying because you have had this one failure, but you'd like them to consider you. So don't be put off by that. All you can do is try. Okay, so then the next question is what probably the most important thing. And when I was making my notes earlier, it's right at the top. It's called your elevator pitch. And if there's any 3 minutes in a meeting or engagement or an interview or at a cocktail party, if there are any 3 minutes that really make a difference, it's in those 3 minutes and I call it 3 minutes because that's kind of a nice rule of thumb. And when you're talking through your entire background, maybe shorter, but not longer. And that is when you are introducing yourself, you're saying enough to get the person you're talking to interested in your story. From then on, they are, set up to ask you things and you can respond. And don't assume that they have read your CV. As an aside, it's really annoying because too many of us recruiters or companies say, we're really serious about recruitment, and then we don't prep sufficiently because we're running from another meeting and we haven't looked at your CV. So don't assume that they have. Give them the benefit of a quick introduction. And by that, I mean, say for example, I always start an interview by saying, okay, Peter, can you start by talking me through your CV or telling me a bit about your background? Now, Peter could say, okay, would you like me to tell you from when I was born? Do you want to know about my personal background? Do you want to only know from where I started studying, etc.? It's okay to ask that if it's a bit vague. And then what I want you to do is say, talk through your CV, but focus on the highlights they may not have picked up. If you were deputy head boy, if you were part of the provincial soccer team, if you one day you were selected to cook dinner for Oprah. It doesn't matter what it is, somewhere where you were actually recognized and did something that was exciting and an achievement. So often I'll hear somebody saying, okay, so I finished school. During school, I wasn't sure what to study. So the career guidance person did some psychometrics and they saw I was very good at biology, and I then went on to apply and I've now studied, etc., etc. So they'll be doing that. And then they'll say, and in actual fact, it was the right choice because I came first in class. And I was like, what? And then I'm looking down through the CV and I'm thinking, I didn't see that. And there it is. I'm like, oh, I'm so embarrassed. But it's perfect to remind the person, right? As if you've got to sell yourself. And then about last week, I was doing an interview prep with somebody. They were doing the interview next day, so we were doing a mock interview. And I said, okay, 3 minutes, give me a summary of your background. And he got so caught up in the early stages of saying, you know what, we grew up here and it was hard. I had to go and stay with my gogo, and my mom went to work, and so, and it was an interesting story. I personally was loving it. But when the 3 minutes came up, it's like I'd had more of a life story than a marketing pitch. And I said, if you've got to encourage someone to hire you, you've got to sell yourself like nobody else can. You're not boasting. Just say everything amazing about yourself that you possibly can, and then it's up to them, right?
Yeah. Tracey, great insights there, and allow me maybe just to add a few of my own. And interestingly enough, I was conducting 4 back-to-back interviews yesterday for some senior roles in the bank. And it's interesting when I, look at the discussion that we've had now about tell us about yourself. I actually felt like I was in the interview because I had a sourcing recruiter. So there was 3 of us. There was sourcing recruiter, I'm the hiring manager, and then obviously the candidate. So the recruiter sort of starts off the interview by saying, okay, well, Peter is going to tell him about yourself, and then you're going to tell us about yourself. So I actually started answering that exact same question as if I felt like I was being interviewed by the candidate. And I think that's nice just to put the candidate at ease, because I almost start as if I'm the candidate and they're examining my CV almost. So I've had lots of practice with, my elevator pitch. So that's one observation. Just being the hiring manager, often you'll get asked to introduce yourself. And that could be a question you want to ask later on in the interviews. Maybe just, tell me a bit about yourself, whatever the case would be. So that was the first thing. So I've had lots of practice in my elevator pitch. The second thing is, of the 4 people, the one just went on too long with this question. And exactly like you said, Tracey, they got hung up on some aspect of their CV. And then I started to lose focus, and, it took up too much time of the interview. So you have to be strict. And just my last advice would be focus on the last few years, because earlier than that, people are going to recognize, and look, again, I know that, bulk of us here are students, etc. But as you build up experience, try and focus that elevator pitch on the most recent time in your career. But I guess the focus today is if you don't have experience, and that's what we must help students with. So let's go then on to this question, Tracey, which is kind of linked to that now and focused on the student situation. The question is, what should you say in an interview if you have 0 experience as a student in an interview?
So you should say you have 0 experience, because you can't shy away from that. Now, what I often refer to, though, is that if you're applying for a job and they're saying having no experience is an issue, I'm not sure that's the right job for you. When you're applying for an internship or an entry level or a graduate role, they don't want experience. They actually want to take you as a grad, and they want to nurture you and grow you within the business. So be careful you're not applying for something where they want the experience and then you're setting yourself up to fail. That said, if they've seen your CV and they can see you don't have experience, and they've invited you to interview anyway, that means they know you. There's something else there that's attractive to them about your profile. And a lot of people would say, oh, we needed this and that. And that. When they're not finding the right people, they will start to consider people who maybe don't have all the credentials. So don't let it stop you from applying. When you go into the interview, I actually had written here, it's okay to say you don't know. It's okay to say you've forgotten. It's okay to say, well, I haven't had experience. However, this is what I think you should do. Maybe that would be useful. Okay.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
These things, sorry, Pete, these things are okay. Just keep the communication, like we said last week. Keep the communication up. People will understand.
And I was just going to add, the other thing that we did talk about last week was, getting some maybe vacation work, or, and we've spoken previously, just any customer facing or back office experience in a shop, or, when I was a student and I had to go for interviews and I had no experience other than vac work, I would say, well, I've been a tailor at Checkers. I've been a waiter, I've done newspaper rounds, so you might have no formal experience related to the job, etc. But talk about your working experience, which I would advise that you do whatever you possibly can to get something. As I say, do a newspaper round, work in your uncle's shop, or beg the company to take you for VAC work. We even spoke last week about Jobbox, which is this freelancing platform for students in South Africa. If you have a two hours spare on a Saturday morning, they will link you up with a company that just needs somebody to do something that you can do for 2 hours, based on the skills that you've loaded into the platform. And there are other platforms like Leaply, which, we've spoken about extensively as well, which are all just, helping you to network and build up not only the contacts that you have in your network, which you must keep in LinkedIn, but any type of work experience that, although you don't have related to the job you're hiring for, it does demonstrate to the potential employer that you've been in a business environment, in a commercially managed operation, working with money, facing customers, dealing with complaints, being part of a process, all of those things. I would certainly, valuable in an interview discussion, even if the person had no direct experience for the job.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Peter, on that note, the Jobbox thing is really exciting for me. I didn't know about it until last week. And it just shows we use people via Upwork all the time. So if you do create a profile there as a student, you could literally say, I'm open to doing admin or data capture, whatever, 2 hours a week. Our assistant is in the Philippines. She helps Peter and I. So, and it's invaluable. We don't have the capacity to hire a full-time person. So it's a win-win. And you see that job work experience, even if it's babysitting, tutoring, or whatever, it's showing that you have accountability. You've got to be a professional in order to keep those kind of roles. So it counts.
Yeah, as you say, babysitting, being an au pair, anything that demonstrates responsibility over something else or someone else, or a task or a job that has to be done. Many of you are at university. See if you can get a tutoring role. Just, that would be, and we have a massive unemployment crisis in this country. So it's not easy. I understand that. But I found that, resilient, entrepreneurially minded people will find those opportunities or create those opportunities. I mean, bake some muffins and sell them on a Saturday morning, on the sidewalk, So I think that's the message, is to just do whatever it takes to demonstrate that you can work with money, you can face customers, etc. Okay, Tracey, let's go on to Phuti's question. Hello, Phuti. Great to have you on board. A good friend of mine and colleague from many years ago. And she asks, good day, does the employee's current C2C affect them in terms of landing a well-paying job, for example, when one is still underpaid with their current employer?
It's a tough one. I want to say it doesn't count, but let's face it, if I had a business and I was looking for someone, and if I could get away with paying them a little more than they're already earning, then I'm not having to pay too much. We human beings, that's what I would take. I would love to say that I would take the person at this salary. It's set no matter who the candidate is, but the reality is it does play a part. That said, the companies and the recruiters also know what they're paying for those kind of skills in the market. So if they're putting out a job spec, they've got an idea of what they're going to pay, and they're not going to try and do you over. So I think don't hesitate to say what you're earning. And somebody earlier had said, how do you get around handling that question? Don't hesitate to say it. But at the same time, you're saying, I am moving because my salary is not market related. And the salary, there's so much more than just the salary, especially when you're young. There could be a rotation program. They could give you time in another office. They could be paying for your accommodation for the first year. They could be giving you a bonus. There's so many things beyond just the basic salary. Straight out of varsity with a study loan and family responsibilities, the cash in hand holds a lot of weight, but the opportunity to learn and the experiences and so on, you can place a large amount of emphasis on that. Now, so good question though earlier was if they ask you in the interview, because honestly, if I was in an interview now and somebody said, "What do you want to earn?" I wouldn't know what to say. I wouldn't want to say too little, and then then they pay me too little, or then I say too much, and then they don't want to speak to me. It's really awkward, and I've been doing recruitment for 20 plus years, and there is for me no right or wrong. If there's any chance to say, do you mind if we chat about it afterwards, to the recruiter maybe, but you don't want it to be uncomfortable. I think mostly the recruiters will ask you before the time, so it's going to be different. But if the point comes up, say what it is that you are earning, and maybe even say, this is what I'm hoping for. Or another good one is to say, I need to earn 10,000, let's say 10,000 Rand a month, because I have to pay 1,000 off my student loan. My accommodation is 2,000. If you can break it up like that, so you want a net of a certain amount, that makes it easier for them to then work out what they can pay, around that. Peter, do you agree with that for when you are hiring someone?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, I would always have a reward specialist that would give us some benchmarks for market-related salaries. So from a fairness point of view, I would want to pay for the skills based on what the industry is, how the industry is valuing those skills. So I would never want to sort of rely on, being too cheap in terms of hiring a person based on their salary. So it wouldn't be like a game for me to try and find out their salary so that I could just offer them the minimum on top of that. Having said that, that's in a large corporation. A small business that's very tight on its costs could be a very different story. So I don't have sort of that perspective of it. But in my experience, Tracey, it's always been to work within the established benchmarks. And then my role as the hiring manager and the expert in that area is to determine, whether they're at the 25th or the 75th percentile, based on those benchmarks, and then work within that. I do think I would take it as a consideration just to determine whether, they would be getting a massive jump, which is also not, I know it's nice. I'm sure people would love to get a massive jump in their salary and double their salary, for example, which is fantastic. But, that also has unintended consequences. So you just need to be thoughtful about their own career and understand that and the journey that they've had in terms of their previous salary and so on. And you might I've actually said to people, I said, look, it feels to me like you're a bit underpaid at the moment. And, I think we've tried being a bit more fair in your situation. Equally, I have said to people, I feel you're a bit overpaid at the moment. You're a little bit out of the market for what we would be able to pay you. And then I should be able to justify that, right? It shouldn't be just a personal perception just to try and, negotiate them down, right? I mean, you must have a balanced, proper discussion about that. And I think, Tracey, you've answered the question on the screen there from Palesa, who asked, what is the best way to communicate that you're not comfortable sharing your current salary in an interview. However, so I think, Tracey, you said have an offline discussion, but, I think recruiters and hiring managers are entitled to see a recent payslip. I mean, there's
they often
yeah, where that's a requirement. So just important about that. And Phuti says, thanks very much. Very informative indeed. All right, Tracey, just going slightly off topic here, but certainly, let's help as much as we can. Wiseman asks, where can law students find mentors for direction, guidance, and inspiration during and after college? So I'll start by saying, join us in the Facebook group, where we have thousands of students at different stages, some finished and some gone on into the workplace, but it is a thriving community of mainly South African students and early stage professionals. And that would be a great question to ask. And we actually have a mentorship program in the Facebook group where you can offer your services as a mentor. And I think there are 10 or 11 mentors already in the group. And when you join, you just click the button for mentorship and you can choose from the profiles in the Facebook group which mentor you'd like to get in touch with. And then that's up to you guys how you want to handle that mentorship arrangement. And usually we suggest, an informal 45-minute discussion once a week or every 2 weeks. And it's got to be mutually beneficial, right? So, I mean, and relevant to your stage. And in Wiseman's case, obviously you'd want somebody with a legal background to give you that guidance, inspiration. Tracey, your thoughts?
Yeah, so mentors are so critical. I think we underestimate the impact a mentor has. And especially as a young person, you feel a bit, awkward to ask someone, would they want to mentor me? Am I rashing them, etc. Once we have a bit of experience, professionals like to know that we're bringing up the next generation, so we want to share. So first thing is, don't hesitate, whether in law or otherwise, don't hesitate to ask someone. You may have to ask 5 people to find someone, but don't hesitate to ask someone to be your mentor. And mentors can be, they can be for many different reasons. So in Wiseman's case, it sounds like you want somebody who is going to almost, who's going to guide you generally around law and moving on within the legal field. And whereas sometimes people want a mentor who's specifically in a company they want to work for, or else is in a company they want a mentor to help them to get. This is a good point, because when Peter and I met with Leaply, with Tian from Leaply 2 weeks ago, you guys will probably know Leaply is a platform that a lot of companies in South Africa use to hire their graduates and their students. And Leaply said the most companies that they have, the most clients are in the legal field. So if you do have a Leaply profile, check that out, Wiseman, because you'll see which companies do recruit law graduates. And then perfect thing is to then go and look at those companies on LinkedIn and go find some of the senior legal people there, and you direct message them and you ask them. They can say yes or no. And remember, the whole thing is not to start off by saying, I am just entering into this profession. I see you have loads of experience. Would you be open to a 30-minute Zoom or a coffee sometime just to share your story? You're not asking any real favors. You're not saying, I want a job that they can say no, we don't have roles or whatever. You're just saying, I'm reaching out. You don't need to make it formal, as in, hi, I'd like you to be my mentor. People just get a lot of those kind of questions, requests, and it's overwhelming. So just start by reaching out to somebody in any of those cases, whether you want a general mentor, whether you want a mentor who's going to help you get into the company, whether you're in a company and there's senior people you want to use. Just start with spending time with the person. You'll soon see whether or not there's a connection. And then you can ask if it becomes something a little more, structured.
Yeah. Tracey, I'm just thinking in the Facebook group, you may recall, and we've spoken about this example many times, but one of our community members used the principle of burning their boats, and her name is Ramona. And we've spoken about this many times because we've talked about burning the boats as a way of beating procrastination and managing your time. And in fact, we've got a couple of courses on that, and we've had a number of webinars on how to manage your time better as a student. And that's one of the principles we teach. And she used that principle very effectively in the group by asking the group to hold her accountable. And what I remember from Ramona was that she was doing law. And she used that burn the boats principle and Kanban, which is another principle that we spoke about, time management, to complete a number of sections of her law degree and pass assignments and get through exams, etc. So Ramona is a long-standing champion of the Student Success Coach Facebook group. And Wiseman, if you pop into the group and make a post, you can tag Ramona in your post, and then you guys can connect and go from there. And maybe she can introduce you to somebody if she's not available or whatever the case may be. But Ramona is definitely I think she's a graduate law student. She's finished now, but she was very active in the group and very helpful and supportive, and has those skills of time management and managing your tasks, burning your boats. And those are the kind of things that you want a mentor to do, to hold you accountable, right? I mean, a mentor is also going to say, okay, by the next week, I want you to have done this, this, and this. And they're going to nudge you and facilitate your own self-development. Tracey, just back to interviews and sort of workplace readiness. I did just put a link in the chat, and we've had Mike Lanesman on one of these webinars previously, and we're launching a whole community and a series of courses around Adobe. And Adobe is, the world's leading sort of creative design software. You could do photo editing, even people who edit movies and do graphic design use Adobe. And, what we spoke about in that webinar is if you're acquiring those skills, Photoshop, for example, is great for editing photographs. You could, set up a little business as a photographer and offer your skills to photograph weddings and parties and graduation, ceremonies and so on. And that could be an extra way of making some money, either just to get that work experience or to have the extra income. So I've put a link in the chat to our latest course, which is Adobe After Effects. So that's free access. There's a few limited seats available for people to click on there and enroll and leave a rating and a review and just get into, that whole Adobe creative world. If that's something that interests you, it might be a side hustle that you want to start setting up and demonstrating a little bit of work experience. Tracey, getting back to interviews, Non-Kululeko, then now sort of working our way through the interview, I guess, asks what kinds of questions an interviewee can ask at the end of an interview.
I have to interject with something different. Pete, we spend a lot of time together. There is not a time that I have a session with you that I'm not making notes for myself. You teach me so much. You're such a mine of information. That's why I always have a pen and dirty hands, honestly.
But Tracey, on that point, remember, guys, these webinars are all recorded, okay? So you can always go back through these webinars, and if we said something, you can go through it and have a look at it. So to Tracey's point, good that you take notes, but the same link that you use to watch live, you can watch the recording if you just need to go through something again. So, but Tracey, back to you.
Okay. On that note, I was touching on, Peter, we get so excited and we're so passionate about this. And it's interesting how we keep wanting to do these certain sessions. And we had agreed, we're going to talk through the interview process, how to plan for an interview, what to do before you arrive, in the interview, little tips about drink your water when you're nervous and all of that. And in actual fact, you guys have been so engaging and asked so many questions. It's just taken on a whole new life of its own. So I'm really loving this session. So when it comes to the end, end of it, it's such an awkward one, because end of the interview, there's a part of you that's exhausted. There's a part of you that just wants to get the hell out of there. And there's another part of you thinking, if I am going to get this job, I need to know certain things, and you're unsure about the timing of it. If they don't say, do you have any questions? Maybe they have to rush to another meeting. If they don't say, do you have any other questions? Then leave it. If they say, you can always say, I don't now, but would you mind giving me your email address and I'll pop you a question later. That's a great way of getting their emails. And never feel like obliged to ask a question, because sometimes you're actually still reeling from the interview. And in fact, a little while ago, I went to an interview for a job that I thought might be interested in. And at the end, it was so awkward because I felt, I'm senior, right? I teach people how to interview. When it came to the end, she said, is there anything more you want to know? And I said, no, actually, that's fine. I know everything I need to. So good questions to ask, though. I think one or two is enough. Good questions to ask are questions that are not related to what is the company going to give you, or what are you going to get, or what do you need, or all of that. Good questions to ask are things such as what the company needs from you. So you could say something like, if I get the job, what would my ideal day look like? Or if the person in the job before, so say the graduates from last year, what was something that the successful graduates did? Or could be a case of, at the end of my first year, what do you expect me to have achieved? Something along those lines. And then you can always say, and do you have a training program or development program to help me with that? Or you could ask about how openly do you work on with feedback? And if I'm not, those kind of things. So engaging, showing that you really care, not what am I going to earn? Or how many days can I spend at home? Once you know they like you, you can always ask those kind of things, because of course they're important. But right now, all you want to do is get them to like you, so you've got negotiating power.
Yeah, or like, do I get a Mercedes company car or a BMW company car? That's sort of.
Or do I get a company car?
Yeah, exactly. Where's the key to my company car? Or where can I pick up my new iPhone as a company cell phone? So, I mean, fantastic to have those aspirations, but not a good way to end an interview, as was the question there. So I just wanted to respond to a couple of questions in the chat. So Phuti asks about a mentorship for procurement. So again, Phuti, you can ask in the group. I don't know of one offhand, but I do have a procurement course, as you and I have worked together on procurement implementation previously. There's a procurement masterclass, which I've made available to you there in the chat, and you probably know a lot of that anyway, but perhaps that'll give you some pointers in terms of a procurement community. And if anybody's interested in procurement, you can do that course as well. And something that Tracey and I often say is, demonstrating additional qualifications and courses completed is always useful talking points in an interview. So if you can say, I did this procurement course the other day just because I was interested in procurement, it just demonstrates that you're open-minded, you're acquiring new skills, and you never know, it can spark a conversation. It can be a differentiator between you and the next candidate as well. Tracey, also just to mention that Robert Cape, who is an experienced recruiter and is actually now a board member at African Bank, and he once led the hiring of 100 CFAs for First Rand and other banks around the world. He has just launched a course all about how recruiters interview and analyze CVs and handle interviews. So if you want to understand from the recruiter's perspective, and especially with Rob's experience of hiring for more than 35 years, that's a nice short course to go through. And again, I've provided free access to that course there as well. And please do leave a rating and a review for us there as well. Just staying with the sort of the end of the interview, and I think, Tracey, you've started to answer this question. Silungile says, what can we ask to get a better understanding of the potential work environment? So I just, maybe my perspectives, I certainly agree with Tracey. Typical day is good. And often something, just to, and it might come up during the interview more than at the end of it, is, sort of just to ask what the focus is in the environment and who the people would be working with, etc. And I can tell you from a hiring manager's perspective, we hire people usually because we need to solve a problem. That's the simplest thing, right? And the problem could be we don't have capacity to do something, or we've got a difficulty between two departments in a certain project, and so whatever that problem is, beyond the role and the job description and the interview process, if it shows some understanding of the hiring manager's problems that they've got, and like you said, Tracey, they're usually rushing from one meeting to the next. It's the business environment. 80-90% of it is about solving problems. You just solve problems every day, and especially as you become sort of more senior, etc. So if you can ask a question that sort of gets the person opening up a little bit about, like, what kind of problems are you dealing with, and how can I help in this role to solve those problems?
That's a great question.
That sort of opens things up. And we've even spoken about this previously, Trace. Put that in the covering letter and say, look, I see you've got an issue with this or that, and I'd like to offer my skills to help you. You might be a little bit off the mark, but that's certainly something that you can use to clarify. And Luistas has also offered an answer. Nice to have you on board today, Luistas. Also a previous guest in one of our webinars talking about his book called The Success Mindset. So Luistas, please do pop a link into the chat for your book, which I see is doing very well on Amazon. So we spoke about that at length previously, and you can pick that up at the YouTube channel. If you subscribe, you'll get access to all the recordings and the interview that we had with Luistas. But he offers a suggestion of a question that you can ask, which is there anything I said which you would like me to clarify? So that's a great question.
Great question.
Yeah.
You see, this is a mine of information.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's actually a good idea. It's like putting the ball back. To your point, Pete, you know, when you ask some company, so if I'm interviewing someone, they say, what's the environment like there? I'm not going to say it's terrible. It's very hard to say, because my team could be fabulous, but the team they're going into is tricky. So whenever, or what is the company strategy into the rest of Africa? Those kind of questions, it's like people are going to say something generic anyway. And if you really want the job, and I say, well, I'm not really enjoying it. If you want the job, you're going to take it anyway. So much rather be actually as specific as you're saying, to get a real kind of answer, or just don't even go there. And there was a question a little earlier from Cindy, and then I was reminding myself to look at. And then there was one other question about those additional studies. When thinking, because there's so much learning out there, there's so many Udemy courses, as we do several of them. It's a good way of knowing what to do in terms of additional studies is when you've got your qualification, your degree, and you're looking at job specs and vacancies, and you see that consistently companies are asking for a specific qualification or knowledge, that's a great time to go and do an Udemy course or to do some online learning. So you've done finance, but you go and do an advanced modeling course online and put it in. That's a great guide to how and what to do. Okay, so Cindy, I wanted to highlight this one. And Cindy, you're always so great about being involved and asking questions, and you're just a pleasure. There are quite a few, and I really need to be more on the ball about this. There are quite a few that I've sort of jotted down here. Generic messages. Ooh. We've got someone got into our webinar with some slightly non-relevant topics. So in any case, I really want to, and Cindy, you and I have worked together before. It's maybe even something that you and I can do together, is just create a few templates we can put on the Student Success Coach that people could literally copy and paste it. For, hi, is it possible to get a job shadow? Hi, or do you offer internships? Or hi, those kind of things. If we could have like 5 template emails that you guys can use and you just tweak them a little bit, I think that could be gold. So Cindy, you can hold me accountable.
Yeah, and Tracey, I just wanted to add on your answer to Cindy's question. Sorry, I was just dealing with that unfortunate chat messages. So Cindy, on that point, a suggestion would be, and if it's a new connection, just connect with the person unrelated to asking them to be your mentor, right? So just connect with them interests or based on something in their profile. And then start building a rapport with them first, right? So, and we actually have a masterclass on LinkedIn, and we do touch on this in terms of how to build your network and approach people. And once you've got a little bit of a conversation going with them, and a very powerful way is, on LinkedIn, people often share a work anniversary, and then you can congratulate them, and it pops up in their messages. And that's the one message that I find people always reply to. If you congratulate them on their work anniversary, because it's a milestone for them and they appreciate the affirmation, right? So you congratulate them on a work milestone and then just say, and then by that point, you've already built a relationship. But by that point, you can just then say, hey, by the way, any chance, you'd be willing to mentor me or suggest somebody that could mentor me, or are you aware of jobs and openings and positions in your company, etc. So Cindy, my suggestion would be, it's like you don't ask someone to marry them on the first date, right? You're going to go out a bit and get to know them, and then the relationship progresses. And I think the same principle should apply to mentors.
I agree.
Okay, Tracey, I think we've covered a lot this afternoon.
Where does the hour go? Gosh.
Yeah, it always goes quickly, hey. Okay, so I don't have any more questions that anybody's got. I think we've gone through a couple of courses and we've shared a couple of them. Tracey and I also have a CV and interview masterclass courses, which you can easily find on our profiles and grab those or get in touch with us if you'd like access to them. And all of these resources we do also make available in the Student Success Coach a Facebook group. Oh, the other one I wanted to provide everybody was the link to a job box. We've had a Bubu Bana on the webinar previously, and we've interviewed him about the job box, and it is going very well. Apparently, he's got a lot of users on there. But like Tracey said, if you're aware of Upwork or any of these freelancing websites, it's basically the same model, but a little bit more focused on the South African industry. And again, provides you with those, short-term, hour, 2-hour sort of types of jobs that can give you that work experience and sort of be a little bit of additional income as a bit of a side hustle. So, Tracey, last thoughts on sort of interviews or anything that we've spoken about today?
I just feel like we still need another one on interviews. Peter, I think one day we should actually get some people to volunteer to be interviewed by us. That could be a great learning for all of us. There are additional tips and tricks, but as you say, we have done the Udemy course and we've included a lot of those, and we'll continue to do so. Also, as I think of things, I'll post it on the Facebook group. I'm trying to be more active, and then Cindy and I are going to work together on some templates to ask people how to be your mentor, to give you that work, to look at your CV, and we'll post those as well.
Yeah, and then just a reminder of all the resources that you get. I'll pop it in the chat if you didn't pick them up earlier. There's this YouTube channel. There's the mailing list as well. So, Tracey, we've got that regular mailing list that goes out when we've got updates or interviews or webinars and courses, etc. So I'll put all of those into the chat. But most importantly, the last one there, as you've mentioned, is the Facebook group. So that's really where all the action happens and where we give out laptops, quite frankly. So Tracey, we've given out six laptops, printers, memory drives, laptop bags. We get sponsored and anonymous donors into the group. And you can go and check out people showing their equipment. It's not a scam, it's real. And hopefully we'll be able to do something like that again in the future. Another question here. Masivu says, greetings. Do you assist students to prepare for interviews? Absolutely, Tracey. So speak about your services. And my humble advice to everybody would be book an hour with Tracey, invest in her services to do a mock interview or a bit of a one-on-one consultation. And Tracey, while you explain what you offer, I'll put your website into the chat for everyone.
Thank you. Yes, the kinds of things that I help my clients with are creating a job search strategy. So rather than just waiting for LinkedIn or PNet or somebody to advertise jobs and you actually just apply and you end up applying for so many and no one comes back to you, I actually work on a strategy where you choose certain companies you really want to work for, and then you start approaching them and engaging with them. It's a little bit about sort of finding the back door in, but it really works. The other things, the favorite part of my job is doing mock interviews. So when somebody's got an interview, they send me everything, the job spec, they send me who they're meeting with. I do some research and then I actually run the interview. So if it's on Zoom, we check the lighting, we get the outfit right, and I'm the client and I interview. We do it first time, we turn the camera off and I'm just putting pressure. Then we do some feedback and then we do the interview with, the mock interview again with the cameras on. And I'm telling you, it takes a candidate from zero to hero because, we have all this information in our heads. But when it comes to nerves, like that interview I told you that I was doing the other day, I felt like I'd run a marathon afterwards. I tell people how to interview all the time, but it's so just getting that, all that stuff in your head and practicing putting it out. That's my favorite part of the job.
Yeah, and it's about confidence, right, Tracey? I mean, if I was to sum it up in one word, when I sit across the table from a candidate, or if I'm being interviewed, for me, you've got to have the confidence as if you not only can do the job, but you're already starting to do the job by helping that hiring manager solve the problems that they've got, right? It's that sort of confidence, not only in what you dress and, whether you sit or stand or how you approach the interview or whether your lighting is good and all the rest of it, or if you've done a mock interview with Tracey, etc. But if you can achieve that level of confidence in that interview, I always think confidence and communication, the two sort of really go hand in hand. And it does take practice. And you guys are often sort of at the early stages of your career. And that's why we have these webinars. That's why you have access to people like Tracey. So take advantage of the resources that we give you. I mean, in our interview masterclass, Tracey, the assignment that we give everybody, which you'll recall, is to actually write that 3-minute elevator pitch. That's your assignment into the course. And we'll give you comments on that. In our CV masterclass course, we give you a template. You fill out that CV according to what we teach you in the course, and then you submit that CV as an assignment, and we might get around to sort of giving you some feedback on that assignment in the course as well. So, referring to the lessons and the information we give you, and then practicing that in terms of the elevator pitch and getting your CV right. Those are massive benefits of doing those courses. So take advantage. It'll only benefit your career. But as we always say, that you have to take the action. A coach, a webinar, online tutor, nobody can take the action that you have to take. You have to do that. So that would be my sort of concluding message.
Yeah, practice with your friends, right? You guys can interview each other, classmates or whatever. Just interview each other, putting each other under a little bit of pressure. And I thought, you know what, because I really love to do it, Masivu, I will do a free mock interview for you, and I'll actually offer 2 more students, and Peter will put it on the Facebook page, 2 more students. And when you have an interview, you can give us the details about it. 2 more students I will do mock interview training before your interviews. So you can put your notes on, Peter, you can post that, and we'll see what we can do.
Let's say, Tracey, so, okay, 1 for Masivu and then 2 others. So if you post in the group, hi, Tracey, I want the first or the second or one of those mock interview opportunities, then Tracey will be active in the group and get in touch with you. Perfect. Okay, Tracey, let's leave it there. Thanks as always for just a really fantastic conversation. I've always absolutely learned so much. So always beneficial for all of us. And I wish everybody a fantastic weekend.
Great. Bye. See you in a week or 2. Cheers. Peace.